Welcome to the It's in Queens podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Simmons, and this is the only podcast that focuses on Queens. You may have noticed something different in this week's episode. Yes, I switched the opening music up, and for good reason. Rather than just talk to today's guest about her wonderful music, I thought you might want to hear it as well. That opening song, an up-tempo track, is called NYC Subway at 8 a.m., and it was composed by Scott Munson and features music of Natalia Peruz, better known as Saw Lady. After you listen to our conversation today and hear some of her music, I am sure you're going to start to recognize the sounds of this rare art form when you're watching a movie or a television show, or even when you hear them on the radio. Now, Natalia, who of course lives here in Queens, has spent decades bringing this form of playing music on a carpenter's saw to audiences around the world. Saw Lady's goal is not only to preserve the rare art form of playing the musical saw, but to also try and push it forward through the invention of better playing technique, fine-tuning the instrument, educating composers about the possibility of composing for musical saw, and bringing the saw to public awareness. She's even played, I'm not kidding, she's even played at Carnegie Hall and Madison Square Garden. The New York Times once wrote that Natalia Peruz is among the few so blessed, summoning haunting music from quivering steel. The saw trembles as if in awe of a fortunate woman doing what she was meant to do. Of course, during the pandemic, her life has changed, like that of many artists. Pre-pandemic, she also had performed underground in the transit system almost every day, earning a cult following. And so, in this week's episode of the It's in Queens podcast, we caught up with her to talk about her life, her career, and what's on the horizon. Saw Lady, welcome to the It's in Queens podcast.
Hi, thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
So first, let's talk about you and your life in Queens.
Well, I was a Manhattan girl, and I moved to Queens, to Astoria, in order to move in with my then boyfriend, who today is my husband. So it was a very successful move. But when I first came to Queens, I didn't know anything about Queens or anybody in Queens besides my boyfriend. And I felt I had like a culture shock. I didn't know where to go. I felt, not really. I missed Manhattan because of my friends. And that all changed when I discovered the free newspapers that are given around town, like in banks and certain stores. I discovered these newspapers and I started reading them. And all of a sudden I felt like, oh, wow, this is what's going on here. And I saw notices for different events, local events. The first one was for the Astoria Historical Society. So I went and I met very nice people there. Then I went to a different event and I saw some of the same people. So I was like, oh, wow, I know people in the neighborhood. And so I owe great gratitude to these free newspapers for making me feel at home in Queens. And today, I've been here for most of my life now, and Queens is definitely home.
I have to say that's something I enjoy, and I actually missed during the pandemic being able to go over to my local bank to pick up all these newspapers. I'm still fortunate that I found other places to get the Queens Chronicle and Queens Courier, Queens Times.
Right.
Queens has a lot of good local newspapers, so it's wonderful. So your career, talk about how it all began, the trajectory to become the official Saw Lady.
Well, I know the concept of playing a tool as a musical instrument might be as bizarre as someone trying to cut a log in half with a cello. But I didn't really choose. It's not like I was looking to do something unusual. It's just happened. I actually was a dancer. I was a trainee with the Martha Graham Dance Company. Until one day I was coming back from Lincoln Center. I crossed Central Park South and I was hit by a car. That was the end of my dance career. I'm very fortunate. My injury is such that I can still walk. I can even run, but I cannot dance. I have a permanent injury to my upper spine. So, of course, I was climbing the wall trying to figure out what to do with my life. After my entire childhood, it was like dance, 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 and that's it. I don't want anything else. And all of a sudden, it's gone. So, my parents wanted to cheer me up and they took me on a trip to Austria. And the reason why Austria is because my favorite movie when I was a kid was The Sound of Music. I watched it like 14 times. So they thought, we'll go to where it was filmed and it'll cheer me up, which it did. But while there, we went to see a show for tourists, and part of the show was this guy making music with a carpenter's handsaw. And it was the first time since the accident that I felt excited about something other than dance. And I even went backstage and I asked the guy if he would give me a lesson, and he said no. Of course, I offered to pay. No. He said, go home, pick up a saw from a regular handsaw and imitate what you remember me doing on stage, and you'll figure it out. So I came back home. I borrowed a saw from somebody here in Astoria who was using it for woodwork, and I did figure it out. And but the thing that happened was I only had 6 notes on that saw because it was old and rusty. So I went to the local hardware store, which was, it's no longer in existence, but it's here in Astoria. And I tried out the different saws. It was like, because I figured that the rust takes away from the vibrations. So I wanted a new saw. And so I was there in the store trying out the different saws, and the owner came to where I was in the store furious. He was like, what's this noise? Who's whistling in my store? And I was like, no, I'm sorry. Nobody's whistling in your store. I'm just trying out your saws. And he looked at me like I just fell down from Mars. But I bought an expensive saw, so he was happy. And sure enough, new saw, no rust. It had like an octave and a half of notes. And so I was at home practicing. I did not mean for it to be a career. It was a hobby. But my neighbors, of course, could overhear the sound through the walls. So this lady who was my neighbor then, unbeknownst to me, she was involved with a local Salvation Army Center, which is on Broadway and like 40 something street in Astoria. She told them about me without telling me. And so out of the blue, a phone call came, was the captain of the Salvation Army, and he asked me if I would come perform, play the saw for their senior citizens group. And I was like, no, I'm not ready to perform. And I didn't intend for this to be a career. But he was like, he pleaded with me, he explained to me how they were broken into and they had all their equipment stolen. And so they were left without funds. And so they couldn't provide entertainment to their different groups. So that's why he was asking for my help. So, how could I say no? So I came and I prepared like a 1-hour presentation of the musical saw, and they loved it. And they asked me to come again to play for their other groups. And then they told about me to a senior center in Woodside, and they called me. And then they told about me to a senior center in Sunnyside. And all of a sudden, I was going all over Queens, performing with the musical saw. So that's when I was like, okay, I guess I can be the saw lady.
And since then, you have performed, for, if I'm correct, movies, TV shows. Just where can people hear your music or see you in some of these?
Today, during pandemic times, I, of course, am not doing live performances. So yeah, movies are a good place. Most of the movies, though, you only hear me. I'm on the soundtrack, like Time Out of Mind with Richard Gere. HBO's The Jinx. That won an Emmy. My saw is all over every episode, and particularly at the very end, which is the height of the.
Don't give it away.
Okay, but there are a few movies where you can actually see me. One of them is Dummy with Adrian Brody. I can actually be seen playing. you know, uh, in another Earth, you see an actor that I coached to pretend like he's miming saw playing, but what you actually hear is my playing. And at one instant, you see an arm bowing the saw, and that arm is mine.
Talk a little about the history of the musical Saw and how it evolved.
Well, as far as we know, it started 300 years ago, possibly before, but we don't know. 300 years ago, um, bendable steel became affordably available. Before that, saws were stiff. Um, and It started about 300 years ago as a folk tradition. Basically, lumberjacks, woodcutters in the middle of the forest, cutting down trees with huge two-man saws. A chunk of wood jumped out of a tree as they were cutting it and hit the blade, and this boing sound came out. So they decided to recreate it themselves, like on purpose. And so at first, saw playing was done by hitting it with a hammer or with a mallet. Uh, if you fast forward 100 years, saw playing became a tool for clergymen, for missionaries. I found quite a few obituaries in newspapers from long ago stating Reverend so and so used to lead the congregation in the singing of hymns with his musical saw. And the reason why is that missionaries, they couldn't take much with them as they traveled all over the world, but tools were essential. So they all, I mean, they built their own churches, they built the furniture, so they needed a saw. So they used what they had. And the sound of the saw is very angelic, so it actually lends itself beautifully to liturgical music.
What are the challenges of playing a saw?
Well, good ears, because unlike a piano where you have keys to press or a flute where you have holes, with a saw there's no indication where the notes are. It's relatively easy to be in the ballpark of a note, but to be in the center of the note, you really need to listen. Also, bending steel. I envy guitar players who can play like 8 hours nonstop, no pain. I tried one time in my life. I played for 8 hours. I couldn't play for a whole week after that. My arm nearly fell off. You're bending steel, it's a workout. Also, cold temperatures are a challenge. I broke two saws playing in cold temperatures because the metal stops vibrating when cold penetrates it. And humidity, it makes the saw rust. So those are some of the challenges.
Who is the most famous person to play a musical saw?
Well, that would be actress and singer Marlene Dietrich, who was an avid saw player. She loved it. She tried so hard to get it into her movies, but unfortunately, all the scenes with her playing the saw were cut out of her movies.
Wow. So I'm curious if you have a favorite place to play. Is there one place that stands out in your memory? I'm hoping it's in Queens, but it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Well, there are two types of places which are my favorite. One is the New York City subway. I'm addicted to public performances in public spaces. The other one is cemeteries. I have played many times at the Maple Grove Cemetery in Kew
Hmm.
Gardens in Queens. Um, it is a wonderful experience. They have many programs there which invite the audience to come in and enjoy music amongst the graves, and also they have actors performing because such an old cemetery, yes, they have the section which is still active today for burials, but they have the old section where burials no longer take place, and it's like a beautiful garden with statues in it, and it's a wonderful space, very inspirational for me to
So,
play.
so many artists are suffering right now amid the pandemic. They've had to adapt. Talk a little about how you've adapted over this last year.
Well, like many musicians, at first I used to do remote performances via Zoom or Facebook Live. But I tell you, remote performances are not remotely the same. Um, I don't like the lack of connection that I get with my audience performing live through the internet. So I've done that in the beginning, but um, I then turned into, see, when you play in live streams, the quality of the sound is not so good and the quality of the visual is not so good. So I thought, what can I do to have good quality? So I made a transfer into creating short films and music videos. And the first one I filmed at Trinity Lutheran Church in Astoria, and it was picked up by the Astoria Film Festival. It became an official selection, and that was very encouraging for me. So through the Astoria Film Festival, I was introduced into this world of filmmakers. And so then I went on to create a music video of a ghost inspired by my cemetery performances. And now I am in the midst of filming another film at Trinity Lutheran Church. And this one is about an angel and the purpose of angels at night and why did God create the world.
And you mentioned this film. Anything else on the horizon for you in the coming months?
Well, mostly it's this film. Also, I did release an album, my third album, which is called Playing on the Edge, and you can listen to it on any streaming platform. Just search Saw Lady. So I am working on new music for yet another album, which I hope will be horror music.
Okay. Now, I'm a little, as I get ready to wrap up, I'm a little risk averse. So, of course, the first question that I thought of for you, but I've saved it for almost last, is about the dangers. Have you ever been cut with a saw?
I have not been cut with the saw playing it. I was cut once at Home Depot when I was trying out different saws. But that wasn't playing. I was just taking the saw off of the rack. So yeah, you have to be careful. But I have to say that it's the opposite of dangers. When you are a saw player, you get a lot of respect on the street because, first of all, you're playing what is considered by some a weapon. But also I carry my saw in a gun case, in a sports gun case, because it's the only shape of a case that would fit, you know. So when I walk down the street with a gun case, I get a lot of respect.
And these days, and a mask. So, so as I get ready to wrap up, where can people go to learn more about you? For our listeners of the It's in Queens podcast, want to find out more about you and what you're up to, where do they go?
sawlady.com is my website where you can watch all my different films, short films, and music videos. Also, I am on Facebook as Saw Lady. I am on Twitter as Saw Lady, but on Instagram, I am the Saw Lady.
There's another Saw Lady. Is that why?
Cheeky person who.
Well, Saw Lady, I want to thank you so much for appearing here on the It's in Queens podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I really find this music incredibly moving. Along with her professional career, Saw Lady makes a point to also perform on the streets and subways as a busker. So I cannot wait as we get back to as normal as possible in, this post-pandemic world, hopefully soon, we can encounter her there. She's busked in the United States, Italy, Israel, Czech Republic, Poland, and France. Oh, and by the way, her artistry is not limited to the saw. She also plays a set of 65 pitched cowbells, English handbells, 4-in-hand handbells, theremin, and glass harp. And I just am astounded. I can only play a few years of the clarinet and couldn't even keep up with that. I encourage you to check her out online and listen to her music. Perhaps make it the soundtrack to brighten your day. Speaking of which, let me brighten your day with some good news. It's only a few more weeks until we turn the clocks ahead, more daylight, and spring is on the horizon. That will bring much more to do outside, and of course, when it comes to all things to do in Queens, there really is only one person who knows it all. Anytime you ask him for advice on something to do, he'll have an answer. I'm talking about the one, the only Rob Mackay of the Queens Economic Development Corporation and Queens Tourism Council, which presents this podcast. Here's Rob's report this week on all things Queens.
Well, hello, Jeff. How are you? I'm going to be brief today with three things to do. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Let's start on February 26th, which is, in fact, a Friday. There is something that we all should be able to relate to. It is a pairing night with beer and chocolate. That's right, beer and chocolate. It's almost as good as peanut butter and jelly. Anyway, Alewife Brewing, which is a brew pub that just moved to Sunnyside. It used to be in Long Island City, and Mylène Jardin Chocolatier, which is a high-end chocolate maker who actually works out of the Entrepreneur Space, which is a kitchen incubator in Long Island City, have decided to join forces, and they're going to have a virtual pairing. Now, one is going to be a Pilsner beer with a hibiscus mint truffle. Another is the India Pale Ale with a ginger turmeric black pepper piece of chocolate. Then we'll have a dark lager and a Shiro miso truffle. That's right, miso in your chocolate. And an imperial stout with a dark chocolate truffle. In all these cases, it's going to be online, but you have to order beforehand. And actually, Alewife they're very good at delivery. You can get the stuff delivered right to you. It's a lot of fun. And everyone, if you don't like beer and you don't like chocolate, I don't know what do you like, really? All right, the next day is February 27th. Musica Reginae, which is sort of an unsung hero. It's a nonprofit that's based in Forest Hills that puts on music productions. They have been around for 20 years. They do a lot of chamber music and ensemble music. And this Saturday, they kick off their season. It's online, yes. The first concert is entitled Unsung Heroines, and it will be female women playing music composed by female composers, female musicians. There'll be a violin, a viola, cello, and piano. And they'll be playing a bunch of different songs. Now, the same day at 4:30, the same people, Musica Reginae, will put together a children's concert. They do a lot of stuff with kids to introduce them to music and instruments. This one will be about the viola. Sorry, some of the same performers will be doing a children's version. The name of the event is called Voila, but they're playing the viola. This kicked off this. You can check out more of it online, but these two events kick off the season, which includes a jazz concert in March, a concert with Balinese music and dance in April, and actually the world premiere of an opera which is geared towards children. That'll be in June, as well as some other children's stuff. Then Sunday, February 27th, starting at 11 a.m., there's an 18th century cooking class. You think food was good now? Wow, was it good back in the 1700s? The Queens County Farm Museum, which is out in eastern Queens, and has a historic farmhouse on campus, on site, will actually film from there using an open fire. They will teach how the early settlers of Queens prepared food using the 18th century recipes, seasonal ingredients, the same old utensils and members, and of course the embers of the fire will be burning the whole time. Two of the dishes will be squash pudding and carrot puffs. And the person who's doing it is a person named Chris Lord Barry. He's an educator. There's a thing there's very common for historical cookers and historical educators. They get dressed up in uniform and in the time period styles fashion. Anyway, that's on the 27th at 11. So there are three events. Please check out all the stuff we have going on at itsinqueens.com. That's itsinqueens.com, or check us out with social media with the hashtag It's in Queens. Jeff, back to you, and thank you as always.
Thanks, Rob. Was I not right? Rob always has his finger on the pulse of Queens. If you're new to this podcast, thanks for tuning in. Each week, my hope is to bring you conversations with the people who are part of the fabric of Queens. The business leaders, the cultural leaders, the people who make our communities stronger. Now, some you may have heard of, or you might have even heard their music like Saw Lady. Others may be new to you. But our goal at the QEDC and Queens Tourism Council is to highlight all that is good about Queens and help cement our reputation as one of the most diverse, creative, and lively destinations to visit, to experience, to do business in, and of course, to live in. I can honestly say that when I was a reporter at New York One, I traveled to all corners of Queens. And so I was really happy to move here about 15 or so years ago. And yet, I still feel like I haven't seen it all. There's always a new venue, a new restaurant, business, cultural organization, park, or natural area to discover. So as the weather gets warmer, I encourage you to make a point of discovering something new each day or each week in our borough. And a great starting point is the Queens Tourism Council's It's in Queens website. That address is itsinqueens.com. You can't forget that. itsinqueens.com. You can also sign up for the Queens Economic Development Corporation's newsletter at queensny.org. And that way you get notified right in your inbox. And remember, no matter where you are in Queens, just tag us on Twitter. Use the hashtag #It'sInQueens or follow us on Twitter at @It'sInQueens. I'm your host, Jeff Simmons, and as I bring this week's It's in Queens podcast to a close, I'd like to leave you with another one of Saw Lady's songs. This is called Souls That Linger, which was composed by Scott Munson. Have a great day.